So again, just a quick introduction. Today is the auto scheduler setup session. This is a step-by-step process through creating your scenario, your course catalog, and setting up your students, your staff, and your courses for scheduling for the 26-27 school year. I can't believe I'm saying that. I think I might have said something different earlier, but yeah, we're talking about 26-27 today. So just a little bit of a preview of where we're going. We're going to start with creating the scenario, which includes the building blocks of your scenario required for every building that uses PowerScheduler. Don't get caught up in the word build for now, because if you attended the overview especially, or you've done this before, you know that you can build a scenario, or a schedule, I should say, build a schedule, or you can copy a schedule. But regardless of how you're approaching scheduling, everybody is going to create a scenario. Some of us get lost in the language a little bit there. We're going to enter our calendar dates in our terms, which I will say, disclaimer, that if you don't have exact dates, like if you work in a district like I used to, the board did not vote until March of each year for school year dates the following year, which is a little late for some of us, right? In what we need to get done. Then you can use what I call fake dates. You can plug in dates today. We are in PowerScheduler. What we're doing does not impact live side data in regard to the dates anyway. So we can put in the dates that we know or we think right now, and we can change them later. But more to come on that. I will definitely talk through more of that and what the specifics and importances of that is. Thirdly, we'll do the course catalog. So we're going to create or use an old course catalog. We'll talk through that a little bit. So I thought it might be good to give you a sneak preview of what's coming before we actually go through the steps, because in a moment, I'm going to flip over to my train database, and I'm going to show you how to create a scenario and how to do these things in our train database. Everyone here should be in your own database and creating a scenario from your own. All right, here we go. So I'm on the start page, and almost all of what we're going to do is going to be in PowerScheduler. I just want to point out, I'm not going to go into our documentation because everybody who was registered, I sent the 2 primary documents of what were needed for today. But our documentation is found here. If you go to the question mark, you click into meta documentation, search the word PowerScheduler. You'll find all PowerScheduler documents, but what we're focused on again today is auto scheduler setup and student staff course setup. So without further ado, let's get into it. What I first need you to do is click on your year up here, or whatever term is showing in blue in the top right corner. You can ignore my favorites, that's specific to my account. And use that drop down. And I need to know if there's a 26-27 term created in my building before I go into PowerScheduler. If there's not, I have to have a 26-27 term on the live side before I go over to PowerScheduler. So if you could drop it in the chat right now, let us know if you don't have one. It looks like I'm going to have to go through the process regardless because I don't have one in my training environment. But that would help us out if we know. There you are. Couldn't find my chat for a moment. All right. So at the district leader meeting last week, and also in our communication out to district leaders last month, we did mention that the year-long terms need to be created at the district office and in each building. And so I do want to put this disclaimer out there. If you as a user do not have access to do this in your building, you may be stuck today. So if you can't create a year-long term from the live side in your building, you're going to want to reach out to your district leader who has access pretty quickly. So I'm going to show you right now how to get there. And then if you could just, again, drop it in the chat if you don't have access to do so, and that'll give us an idea. And and maybe we'll wait a couple of minutes to see if we can get district leaders to help us out here. But again, the communication in October, our district leader meeting last week, was this is something that has to be done before we can build a scenario in PowerScheduler. So I am going to go to school management and scheduling and years and terms. If you don't have this option on your menu, that means your individual security does not allow you to enter years and terms. When I click into years and terms, I'm going to go to new if I have this option. And here I'm going to name it just like my example entry. Give it an abbreviation, just like my example over there. And then I'm going to plug in my first day of school that I either know or I can guess at right now. But hopefully you know it. If you don't, you can guess. So I'm going to go out to August 2026. And we usually start on, the second or third Wednesday in August. So that is my best guess. And then our end of year, at least in my kids' school, it's always the Thursday before Memorial Day. So that's the date I'm going to use. Yours may be different. All we need on the live side today is the full year term. We're not going to build semester or quarter length or trimesters or anything complicated on the live side. We only have to have the year-long term on the live side. Once I have my dates programmed, be sure that you have 26 to 27. I've made that mistake plenty of times. All right. It's hard to think out a year in advance like that. We're not used to putting 2027 on anything quite yet. But we're getting into it. So that's what yours should look like, something like this for the year-long term. If you already have a year-long term on the live side, you can skip this step. Now I have my year-long term. Now when I go up here, I have a year-long term on the dropdown. And that's really important for what we're going to do in PowerScheduler. Any questions or issues with that side of things that we're seeing? Is there anybody who didn't have the year-long term and is also unable to create that year-long term and is kind of feeling stuck right now?
Stephen, you might want to mention when it is important to have the actual dates.
Oh, thank you, Mark. So out in the future, you will eventually want to have, of course, for obvious reasons, you will want to have the actual dates, but let's tell you why a little bit. When you go to start enrolling students into classes in PowerScheduler, you would not want the wrong dates in PowerScheduler. So if you're putting in what I've referred to as fake dates, obviously you need correct dates. I mean, in general, we kind of know that, right? But the reason is because you wouldn't want to have the wrong enrollment dates on student enrollments once you start pushing kids into classes in PowerScheduler. So that's the most important time to make sure your dates are corrected. So going to my example of when I worked in a school building, who made the decision in the mid-spring, I wouldn't want to have loaded students into their enrollments, into their courses until I had those firm set dates from the Board of Education. And then you will need to change those dates if they're changing here on the live side and also in PowerScheduler. And then we always do encourage your district leaders. So some of you may be unfamiliar with that term. Your district leader is your point person in your district for PowerSchool support. So the way we support our school districts is your first point of contact for PowerSchool help is your district leader. And then after that point, if they're not able to help you, if they're seeing problems that they can't resolve, they reach out to us. They reach out to our core team, and we can. Well, honestly, I forgot where I was going with that, but I just wanted to point out that I can't remember where I was going with that, to be honest. So, yeah, there's certain things that you can do or you can't, and I think where I was going with that is that we meet with your district leaders every month, and we get communications out to them, and we tell them that, things like, hey, make sure your dates are accurate in both PowerScheduler and on the live side. So I believe they should be checking that for you as well. I think that's where I was going with that. All right. Is there anybody that is not ready to move on? Because I'm going to flip over to the PowerScheduler side now. So from my main menu, my left nav menu, as we call it, applications, PowerScheduler. I have to be in my building in order to get to PowerScheduler. There is no PowerScheduler at the district office level. So if you do have district office access, you do not want to be there. You want to be in the building that you're scheduling in. So applications, PowerScheduler.
Should we be in this current school year or in the future school year that we're building?
That's a great question. So the school year that you're in on the live side will not matter to the process that we do today. But it comes up every year, and I understand why. When I come over here to PowerScheduler, just a disclaimer, part of this process is eventually changing the scheduling year over in PowerScheduler, and that's what's important. So it's all the same data, no matter what, student data, no matter which year you're in terms of individual to the student, I should say. And once we go to PowerScheduler, we're going to change the scheduling year to 26-27 as part of this process. But yes, good question. I know a lot of you were thinking it. Any other questions before we move on? All right. The reason we the reason we not so creatively call this session auto scheduler setup is because of this link right here. We talked about this many years ago, and we thought, hey, we just want to make it very clear on where PowerScheduler begins, how to get a scenario in PowerScheduler. So we're just going to call it what PowerScheduler calls it, and that's auto scheduler setup. Everything in PowerScheduler starts at auto scheduler setup. If you circumvent this process, if you kind of go around it and you try to do it a different way, we've seen that before. Maybe someone that doesn't attend this training and they do things either out of order or they try to go about it a different way. We've seen hiccups later on down the road. So we all want to make sure we do this auto scheduler setup here. So we're going to click there. All right. Lowest term level division may not be very clear on what that means until you click the drop down. And then it becomes a little bit more clear. Lowest term level division is the smallest amount of time or the smallest term that you schedule into. So by default, no one's going to have less than semesters. Even if you're a middle school and this is a rare one, but even if you're a middle school and every single course is a full year, no semester length classes, you're still going to, by default, select semesters. However, if you have trimester long courses, quarter length courses, 6-week length courses, then you may be selecting something different. So most commonly, I know a lot of you will select semesters because you only have full years and or semester classes. Many of you will select quarters. Some of you will be trimesters. And then a couple of you, usually middle schools, will be maybe like a 5 or 6 week courses. And again, to be clear, we're only talking about the shortest length of time that a class is scheduled into. This is not grading terms. Grading terms is set up on the live side, and it's done much later by either you or someone else in your building before school starts next year. So even, for example, even if you only have semester and year-long classes, you might give quarter grades. That doesn't matter here. All that matters is how you schedule. And so does anyone have any questions about what they might select? I'm going to pick quarters, and you'll maybe see why on the next page. Just want to give an example. The next question is the number of periods you schedule into per day. Now, I will say this disclaimer for today because we have roughly just over 2 hours to complete this session. We're not going to discuss how to figure out the number of periods. We spent probably like 20, 25 minutes on that alone in the overview. So again, hopefully you're able to make it. The number of periods is important for a system build. And if you missed that, just a quick definition, a system build is you're telling the computer everything you know about your schedule, and then the builder or PowerScheduler is going to build your schedule for you based upon what you've told it. If you are copying your master schedule, this option doesn't matter much, because when you copy that master schedule later on this morning, if you are copying, it's going to overwrite this number of periods anyway. And if you had 10 periods in the current master schedule in this current school year, it's going to be 10 periods. And if you had 25, it's going to be 25. So again, this answer only matters if you're system building. This is another point where I want to say, don't let that scare you off from the system build. If you are unsure of the answer today still, and you might be, I want you to pick a number, and this can be changed later, okay? But you can't actually build your schedule until we have this number corrected, and it's very easy to correct. There is a drop down later on, I'll show you. You could change it from 10 to 25 to 8, whatever you need. But hopefully you've worked that out with your team. That was what I called the homework after the overview. And that is figuring out how many class periods or slots of time you need for your master schedule build. All right. So I'm going to keep my answer simple, and I'm just going to say 10 for the purposes of this training. And then number of days. So this is referring to cycle days. Think of your student schedules currently. If we're talking about the current school year where your kids are sitting in classes, the number of days pertains to the number of different types of days that are on your calendar, and they're called cycle days. Many of you are an A-day only schedule. You're a 1 day, which means for all intents and purposes of this conversation, the same thing kind of happens every day in your school in terms of how the periods play out, or which classes the kids go to, I should say, really. Some of you have 2 days where you have an A day and a B day. I worked in a middle school years and years ago, and we taught on an A-B day schedule. So the kids would go to their A-day classes every other day and their B-day classes every other day. And what I find to be most common besides a 1 day is a 5 day. So maybe you work in a middle or high school, and throughout the week, there's maybe 1 day or 2 days that kids might go to some different classes, such as choir only takes place on Tuesdays and Thursdays, or band takes place on Mondays and Wednesdays. If you're I'll give the example of maybe a smaller school that wants to make sure that every kid who wants choir and band gets to take both. I've seen some of our middle schools do it that way. So Monday, Wednesday, or Tuesday, Thursday type situation. So that would be maybe a 5 day. A 5 day could also pertain to a CCP schedule at the high school. And I worked in a school who did that as well. So we had a Monday, Wednesday psychology class and a Tuesday, Thursday sociology class. And I can't remember, but I think we had a Friday only class too. So that was the day 5 schedule. Only those kids scheduled into that class would go to that class on Fridays. So, excuse me. Okay. Any questions about number of periods or number of days for now? And If not, if they're a little bit more specific or detailed, that would be a good opportunity for a scenario planning session. But if you have a general question that maybe we could help iron something out with right now, now would be the time to ask it. I'm not seeing anything in the chat, not hearing anything, so I am going to move forward. And again, just want to I will restate this, that if I've gone too fast, if you feel like you need me to slow down or back up, please let me know. Don't want anybody to miss anything. And I know some of you have done this before, might be the opposite and like, hey, let's get going here. So I know we have a mix of users here. All right, next page. This is an easy one. You have to checkbox your full year, your semester, and any other terms that you're scheduling within. Again, not grading terms, scheduling within. So in my school that I'm creating a scenario for, I schedule full year classes, semester long classes, and quarter length courses as well. I don't have trimester classes, but because I selected quarter, it by default included anything kind of within that mix. So just wanted to point that out. I don't actually have trimester courses. It will not create trimester terms because I didn't select it here. I'm only selecting those 3. But you have to, at a minimum, select full year and semester. I'm going to continue. This is the part that's going to take a little bit longer. Obviously the answer to the questions aren't difficult, but you do have to punch in all those dates right now. So if you have quarter trimesters or less, it'll take you a little bit longer. I'm going to go ahead and be quiet for a minute or two. I'm going to plug in these dates. Please feel free to put it in the chat if you have any questions. The last thing I'll say before I do that is there should be no gaps in term lengths. So, for example, I'm going to do some guesswork. Actually, I'm going to use this little calendar icon to make sure I'm on the right track here. And that's what I recommend. So I'm going out to January 27, which is again just over a year from now. Can't believe it. And we're going to start school next school year. We're going to come back to school from the holiday break on January 4th. Therefore, by default, my S1 term ends on the 3rd. Okay. So S1 ends on the 3rd. This throws a lot of us sometimes. S2 starts on the 4th. The most important answer to the question here is, when does the next term start? When is the first day kids are sitting in classes in the term? And that is the first day of that term. Then moving backwards, the day before that is the last day of the prior term. So because the first day kids are back from break in semester 2 is January 4th, 2027, by default, the last day in semester 1 is January 3rd. You might be thinking, hey, my kids aren't in school on a Sunday. They're not in school, on those other days. But just know that PowerScheduler, PowerSchool does not like gaps in term dates. It will throw errors. So that's why so when you put in a full year term from August till May, you have to encompass every day of that year within your terms. So again, I'm going to be quiet and I'm going to put in my dates. Please feel free to unmute or put it in the chat if you have questions about this. And I will leave my screen up so you can see what I did here.
Stephen?
Yes.
So if we use this year's dates, because we don't have the calendar for next year, we could go back and then change those, correct?
That is correct.
Okay, thank you.
You can use, I call those fake dates. That's okay.
Yeah.
And just a thing that I'd like to mention, let's say that you didn't worry about some of these things because you planning on copying, or maybe somebody changed their mind later, you can go back and change number of periods and things of that nature if you're going to let the computer figure out your schedule.
There's a question in the chat. Does the first day have to be when students are in the seats? Probably referring to my January date I've given. We do recommend that. And here's what. So your EMIS person, your state reporting person, may get errors. I'm not positive on that. That's what I've been either led to believe, or that's what I've thought. But I'm not, maybe another member of the team has insight into that. What will happen, though, is that if your semester 2 begins on, say, December 21st, but your enrollments don't begin until January 4th, I don't know if that causes an error or not. But the other thing to think about, besides any potential errors, is something just to consider. If your semester truly ends on December 20th, as in that's the last day, I'm pretending the 20th is a Friday. I don't really know. The 20th is a Friday. That's the last day kids are in S1 courses. They go home for holiday break. If we say that the semester flips over on the 21st to the new semester, then the enrollments now are different for your teachers, and it may cause a problem with grading, especially if you lock your grade book after so many days that the term ends. And so we've run into that as well, where if you have it set up in such a way that S2 begins on Saturday, December 21st, then your teachers are locked out maybe a day or two later, and maybe they're wanting to complete their grades over the holiday break. And then another question in the chat. Thank you, Meredith. Addressed this question already. Do we have to have quarters listed if we use it for grading? We do not schedule quarter length courses, but we do input grades for that endpoint. And Meredith said, you do not need quarters here for grading purposes. If your shortest class is a semester long, you will just have semesters here. Grading terms will be set up later on the live side. I'm going to give everybody another minute or two and then check in. Does anybody need more time on this screen to put in your dates? And most importantly, there's no gaps in term dates. One ends one day, the next begins the very next. All right, before I click continue, sometimes we lose somebody at this point. Before I click continue, I do not want you to navigate away from the next page until we have saved it. So give me a minute or a couple minutes to explain this next page. What will happen if you navigate away from the next page is it's not going to save any of the dates you just put in. Okay, someone needs a little more time, and thank you for letting me know. That's very important. I want to make sure that everybody is ready. All right, so again, if you have clicked continue, that's fine, but please do not navigate away from the next page until we have saved it, or else you will lose your progress so far. And I know it doesn't feel like we've done a whole lot, but those dates are kind of tedious to put in. And I don't want you to have to do that again. But that's one of the reasons we do all this together. I guess in this case, what may seem simple gets a lot more complicated if things aren't done in the correct order. Okay. I'm going to click continue, and I'm going to talk a little bit about the next page and how to save that properly. So this is that warning I was alluding to here. You have unsafe changes. Click submit to complete the automatic schedule setup process. Excuse me. So what we want to do on this page, and if the school in the chat that wasn't quite ready, if you're still entering dates, that's okay, because this will take me another minute or two on this page. And again, I do invite you to let me know if you need help getting caught up. All right. So on the build name, or when we say build here, we're talking about the scenario. So on the build name, I like to put in the acronym of the school. So I'm going to say Meta High School in addition to the year. And then what I also like to do and like to invite you to do is enter how you're approaching scheduling. So are you doing a system build, maybe an SB or the word system? Or are you doing a copy? And you could just put in copy. That way, when we troubleshoot for you, when we go into your scenarios, as I'm sure you know, we have access to your PowerScheduler, to your PowerSchool environments. And when you ask us questions, when you need our help, we will go in here and kind of look at things, troubleshoot, answer questions for you. But it is helpful if we know if you're copying or building. So if you could please put that there, we would appreciate that. And then what I'm going to do is just copy, paste this down here. All right, in the chat, we have a question. Can you explain why a build may be better than a copy? Their school has historically done a copy, but they want to make sure that that is the most efficient. So what a copy does essentially is, truly what it does. It takes every course section and who's teaching that course section currently in the current school year, makes a carbon copy of it and brings it over to PowerScheduler. So that could be advantageous, right? Kind of sounds simple. Hey, our schedule works. We're bringing the schedule over from the live side into PowerScheduler, and we'll just work from there. Almost always in a copy, there is some tweaking involved. So therefore, I'll put that disclaimer on it that after I've copied over, now I have to maybe change who teaches what. That's about the simplest example of something you would change, right? Teachers change. Someone retires. Maybe a new teacher will come in. Maybe a program gets cut. and I have to remove those sections. I can remove them. Maybe, just maybe, there's a new program being added, and I can add courses sections. I can add teachers to those course sections. All right, all that's very doable in a copy. What a copy does is it takes out the conflict, the potential conflict resolution. And especially at a high school, I will say, every time you graduate a group of students and you bring a new crop of incoming students in, that population changes, if ever so slightly or a whole lot. And they may have different needs and different wants if you have some options, in terms of electives. And therefore, by not building and copying, now, again, disclaimer here, a lot of our schools copy, namely middle schools, more common at the middle school. But by copying your master schedule, there's no conflict resolution that the system is doing for you. It is simply a copy. You are hand changing a master schedule, and then you're using the load functionality of PowerScheduler to get the kids into class sections. But you're not letting the system try to figure out where the best place for that algebra class is, or where the best place for that band class is, or where the best place for that elective that only certain kids want is in their schedule, by looking at what else is on their schedule. So that all goes out the window when you use a copy. So really, it's conflict resolution. All right, I'm not going to change any of these because I've already plugged those in. But again, if the answer to any of these changes, I can go back and make changes later. The only other thing I need to do on this page is I need to add a course catalog. Years ago, every time we did this process, we would have you create a new course catalog. And there may be a reason you want to do that. But honestly, in the last 2 years that we've been having you reuse an old catalog, I haven't yet found a good selling point for why not to just copy the old catalog over. It is so much easier. So what I did last year is I simply renamed the previous year's catalog to current. So you can see for the years we've done scheduling, we would name them by the year, just like the scenario. But I'm just going to reuse that last year's catalog. And although in my training environment, it won't be as clear how advantageous that is, but hopefully in your own environment, it will be. And here's why. Those courses are already set up with their preferences, and you don't have to go through all the courses either en masse or individually and set every single thing up about all your courses, because that is done from last year. Do things change? Of course. Things change year to year. Maybe you're not using a course anymore. You're maybe adding a new course. Maybe that course needs to be scheduled differently this year. Maybe there's less demand for Algebra 1 this year based on your student population. Or there's no students that need Calc this year, something like that. But it's a good starting point so different from copying your master schedule. I want to make that clear. We're just I'm calling it reusing. We're reusing a catalog. And all that is the courses and their setup. And then we can tweak the courses from there as needed. So I'm going to reuse last year's catalog, and I'm going to encourage you to do the same. And now that I have all of this filled in, now I can hit submit. Before I do, does anyone have questions? Okay. I'm going to submit. Once I do, I have my scenario. Now I have this is your list of scenarios from past years. 26-27 MHS copy. This is what I just created. So you're not going to see a build. You're not going to see a load. You'll see the catalog that I attached, and this one is now active. Now, if you're wondering, this might be the case for you. If you're wondering maybe why your newest scenario that you just created is not at the bottom like mine is, it is alphanumeric order here. And so because I used the starting name of 2026, it is all the way at the bottom. But if you had ones that were called MHS something or other, or maybe you start with the word copy in a previous year, then that's probably at the bottom. So I just want to point that out. So look for the active one, the active status, and that's the one you currently have that you're working on. It's very, very important that when you're doing scheduling, the scenario you want to work on for next year is the active one. That doesn't change automatically. It doesn't just get changed inadvertently. That's something that you would have to change, but that will come later. So when we get into work days, we will show you why you might make an old one active to look at something, but just be certain that, again, it wouldn't just happen to you inadvertently. It is important that your current scenario is the active one and that it has a catalog with it. But that's not usually a concern. So, all right. Okay, moving on to next steps. So we're going to go into years and terms now they've been created. I'm going to click years and terms and look at my 26, 27, edit terms. And this is a really simple step. Oh, I will come back to that question.
Okay, you're going to get there. Yep.
Yep. I see in the chat someone asked, well, how do I change the course catalog name from 25, 26 to current? And I will address that. All right. So, but first, we're going to click into each of these. This is the simplest part of this entire morning. We're just going to click into each of these. And we're going to plug in this import file term number into this blank. You're copying and pasting or just simply typing it in, whichever your preference. This part of this step right here may never be important to you in your scenario, but it could be helpful. And so by default, we have it as part of our steps because there are processes that we do for you in the background when and if requested that this will make it a little bit easier for us to get to what we need. But you may never notice what this does, but we will. So please help us out, plug in those file term ID numbers, and it'll just be done. Questions there?
Hi, Stephen. Sorry.
Hi.
Could you just say where we look at the file term again?
Yes. You're going to click into the years and terms on the left side menu. From there, you're going to find, it should be at the very top, your 26, 27 year.
Mm-hmm.
Click edit terms. Once you click into each of these terms one at a time, you'll find that term number below.
It's right there. Okay, got it. Sorry.
Yep, and you're just gonna, that's okay. And you're just gonna plug it in there.
Okay, thank you.
Yep, thank you for asking. Give you another minute on that. All right, and the next thing we're going to do, another pretty easy step here, but this is even more important. So I want to make sure everybody's doing this step. So this is something that came up earlier, just part of our steps, one of those necessary things. It seems like such a simple thing, but it could really mess you up if you don't. At the bottom of your menu here, there is a functions menu on the left. From the functions menu, you have a list of scheduling functions. And our next step is to set scheduling year or set schedule year. This is my favorite menu visually in all of PowerScheduler because everything is just in alphabetical order. And that makes my brain happy. So very easy to find what I'm doing here. Set schedule year is right near the bottom. And because we created that year-long term on the live side, that's why we have the option to select 26-27. So we're scheduling for year 26-27 now. I select it from the dropdown and I submit. Very easy step. It is going to take me by default back to the scenarios page in PowerScheduler. But for anybody who missed it, I'm going to go through that again because it's a very important step. Again, seems simple, but very important to us. On the left side menu, what I did was I went to the Functions menu under Tools. Then I selected Set Schedule Year. I selected 26-27 from the dropdown. And again, I had that option because somebody has built a year-long term on the live side. And I submitted. Any questions before we move on? All right, earlier in the chat, it was asked, how can I change the course catalog name if I would like to do that? We are going to talk about course catalogs right now. So everyone, I want you to click on course catalogs under scheduling setup on the left side. And just to clarify here, you have 3 hyperlinks. There's a reason for each of these 3 hyperlinks on your active catalog. Notice that I only have this edit course catalog on my active catalog, right? So all of these are inactive, therefore I can't edit them. Those are old news. We don't need them anymore. They're just sitting out there. We're not going to delete them. We're just not going to use them anymore. All right, delete's a dirty word in PowerSchool. So in order to change the name of your any of these catalogs, but namely the one you're using this year, is simply by clicking into the name of it. I chose to give a little description. You can do that if you'd like. You don't have to. My current meta course catalog. Now I always know which one we're using. It's not confusing. I'm not looking for years. I'm not like, are we in 25, 26? Are we in 26, 27? What year is it? I don't know. No, we're just saying it's the current one. It just makes it simpler for one in the naming convention. But also you're going to see again, the advantages when you actually go into your course catalog in a little bit. I'm going to submit with the changes. I'm not going to delete that. Please don't delete that. The other link, the hyperlink you're going to use from this page is Edit Course Catalog. You won't need this one. This will just take you to your list of courses, which we'll get to a different way. So whenever you want to look at every course in the catalog and you're ready to start making decisions about which courses you need and which courses you don't, this is the place to go. Let me show you what I mean. Edit Course Catalog shows me all active courses available to my building that I have checkboxed to be active in PowerScheduler in the current catalog. So in past years, somebody had decided Adaptive PE course number 771 was no longer needed in PowerScheduler. So I'm going to talk about a few things on this page. All right. And this is where I'm going to start. Any course that you're using in PowerScheduler should be checkboxed here. There are courses that you'll use on the live side, but you'll never schedule in PowerScheduler. You don't technically need those over here. This is not activating a course for the year. By unchecking it, it's not taking it away from anybody on the live side. It's not removing it from availability. You're not changing the actual course on the live side from this page. all you're doing by unchecking these is you're saying I don't need it at all in PowerScheduler. Now, there are some considerations because this is a loaded topic. So, rule of thumb, do I need the course for the build? Do I need the course to load students into the sections? Do students request this course in PowerScheduler? If any or all of those is true, I have to have these in PowerScheduler. I'll throw another caveat on top of that one. If I'm copying my master schedule from the live side, and there are simply sections that we hand build as we know students need them, like student aid in the office, CCP, Apex credit recovery. Maybe I don't schedule those out as part of my PowerScheduler process, but those sections still exist in my master schedule. And if I'm copying my master schedule over and I remove those from the catalog, PowerScheduler won't know what those courses are anymore. All right, so it's a question that you might want to discuss with members of our team. Which should I uncheck? Which should I leave? But again, as a general rule, if you need it for the build, if you need it for the load, and or if students request that course, you need it in your catalog. So some things to think about. We are not going to take the time on this call, on the Zoom, for you to go through every course and make that decision today. That's what I'm going to call your homework. So the first advantage of reusing a course catalog is all the courses that are checkboxed were checkboxed by somebody, either you or someone else last year. So theoretically, these are the courses that were used in PowerScheduler last year, right? There may be courses you didn't use. Maybe you didn't actually schedule Italian, but you had it in there. That's okay. You can have courses checkboxed here you don't use. It's not going to hurt anything. They're just going to maybe get in your way. So the most important thing here is that you have them checkboxed if you are using them. Oftentimes, we're working with a scheduler and they're saying, hey, my district leader created a new course and I cannot find it in PowerScheduler. So whenever somebody, you or someone else in your district or building, create a new course for you to use in PowerScheduler, you will need to come over here and checkbox that course. We have a new version of Algebra 2 this year. I have to checkbox it. Now I have it. Also, please keep in mind, we see this, not a lot, but we see it sometimes. If I get really uncheckbox crazy over here, and I don't know if I need these, I'll decide later. I'm just going to uncheck them all. By the way, there's no easy way to do this. I'm sorry. I'm just going to uncheck 15 courses or so. If I do that and I submit the change at the bottom, I will lose within this course catalog. I will lose the course settings for these courses. So be sure you're not using those courses before you go uncheck happy on it. So this is going to be something, this is worth a discussion internally on your team. Which courses are we using? Which are we not? And when you've come up with some questions, that's a good time to schedule time with our team members. If and when you have questions about what should be checkboxed and what should not. All right, we have a question in the chat. For some reason, all my courses are red, and how do I fix this? So we're going to look up at the warning icon. I think I had a warning on here earlier in my own train environment, and this is why. Courses are in your catalog, but not available for scheduling for the designated school year. So in a nutshell, that means they're here. They're probably the ones you need, but somebody made them inactive for next school year. All right. One of those things that creating the new year long-term on the live side should have done for you is by default made all those courses available for next year. But it's possible, and it's sounding like somebody made those courses unavailable either to your building or for that year next year. So that's something I would get with your district leader about, or whomever manages courses. There is a mass process to update those, and we can help you with that if you have access to that. You're simply needing to make all those courses that you need active for next school year in your specific building again. So it's not, you know, a terrible thing, but it is cleanup that needs done. All right. So again, important points here. The courses you need checkboxed. The courses you don't need, you could uncheck. If a new course is created, you will want to come here and checkbox that course so that you can set it up. You have access to it. So that goes for any, maybe it's March 2026, and your curriculum director or assistant principal or someone at the district office level says, hey, we're offering these new courses. Here's 3 courses. I've made them available to your building. You need to get them in your master schedule. Not great timing, I'll admit, but it does happen to most of us. So at that point, you will need to come to this page and checkbox those new courses. Say, okay, we're now using these courses. Now I have them available to me. And there's more steps beyond that, but this is just the starting point. If you get new courses created for you, make sure they're checkboxed here. Okay. Questions about your course list? Okay. All right, next up. This is for all of those of you on the call. I know there's at least some that are copying your master schedule. I'm going to talk through a couple things about the copy that I want to make sure you know before we do this. First is, no harm in hitting the copy button. The copy button, once again, as stated earlier, it brings over all of your course sections to PowerScheduler. So if you're considering copying, there's no harm in doing that today. There's also a function, a much more dangerous function, I might add, delete the master schedule in PowerScheduler. So I'm not going to talk about that today. But the reason I tell you that is some of you may be considering copying. Some of you might want to bring a copy over, take a look at it. We don't normally recommend that, honestly. We typically recommend pick one way and go with it. But some of you will copy. It's happened every year with some people. I copy my schedule over and I'm like, ooh, there's just too many little things that are different. I really need to system build. Just know that, again, I'm not going to show you the delete master schedule, because if I copy my schedule today or tomorrow or next week, and then I decide to system build, it's just going to write a schedule over top, a new schedule over top of my copy anyway. So again, really no harm in copying. But if you're unsure, please ask. But I am going to walk you through this, the very easy steps of copying your master schedule today. It's found on the functions menu where we were at earlier. So it's very easy to find. It's a very easy process. So I'm going to show you that right now. So those of you who are copying, we're going to go to the functions menu in the bottom left corner. We're still in PowerScheduler, and we're not leaving PowerScheduler. And I am going to go to copy master schedule. Again, alphabetical order on this screen, very easy to find. And I'm going to simply click copy master schedule. Mostly pretty clear here. All right. But I want to talk to you about these options here. The source year is where you're bringing the schedule over from. You will be bringing it over from last year, or I should say the current school year, right? This is the current school year. It would be a very, very rare thing to use a master schedule from a prior year. So when I'm copying from the current year. All right. You don't need to clear existing terms in the destination school year. All right. So you can skip that, and you can click to confirm here you want to proceed. So I'm selecting the year, I am confirming, skipping that middle one, and I'm submitting. So we don't want to overwrite what we just built. So skip that one. Any questions before I hit submit? Again, feels pretty simple, but it does a lot. Okay. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on this next piece, but I do want to show you how I know that my schedule is copied over, and I can be certain that it was copied over once I did that. I did get a green banner for a very short time, then it zips away real quick. But I want to show you that now when I go to the master schedule over here under schedule, I can now see that there's rooms on the menu. It did change my number of periods to match whatever I had in 25-26. Has all my teachers here. I'm going to sort by teachers. I'm going to submit. Again, I'm not going to spend much time on this page. This is more going to be individualized to the building, but I did want to point out that now I can see all these sections here with the new term matching exactly what I have on the live side except the new term. Another way you could look at individual, if you want to look more individual, is I could go to the teachers menu, which we are going to spend time talking about later this session. But I just want to point out, if I wanted to now see after I've copied what my teachers are scheduled into, again, there should be no surprises because it looks just like the live side in what their schedule is. So I'm going to go to my first teacher here, go to their schedule, and I can see everything that they teach. What room, what term, what expression or period they teach it in. Biggest difference compared to the live side is, of course, no students enrolled. I wouldn't want that to come over. So I just made a carbon copy of my master schedule in PowerScheduler to work from. And I might be the type of scheduler who even though acoustic nightshades, we have some interesting names in our train database, by the way, because they're not real. But even if Nightshade Acoustic schedule is completely changing, I can click into each of her sections and make the manual changes myself. Maybe the room number, maybe the expression, maybe the term, something else. Maybe this teacher won't be here next year, and I could change that too. So that's more of the mindset on a copy master schedule is I'm copying to tweak or hand adjust if you prefer that term. Okay. So I just showed you two different ways to look at the schedule. There are more, but I'm going to leave it there for now. Going to close this. And we are now going to move on to the portion of this training that is specific to student, course, and staff setup. So main thing is for students, make sure you have the right students and that they are set for scheduling. That's what we'll look at first. Main thing for courses, are there new courses? Are there changes? Then eventually we'll get to, are your current courses set up correctly? Which will be homework, because that's a big chunk of this, big chunk. Staff setup, are all the teachers set up the way you need them to be? Are they set for scheduling? Are they available to you in PowerScheduler? If they're not, we're going to show you where to find them. Are they set up the way that you need them to be scheduled appropriately for next school year? So I'm going to go back to PowerScheduler, and the first piece of this I want to talk through is students. PowerScheduler calls your student, staff, and courses in rooms resources. They're resourced in PowerSchool, which sounds like a very computer thing to say. I know. We know they're human beings. We know that these are the pieces of the schedule we're working on, and that's just kind of how the computer sees them, right? They're resources to be leveraged to make the best schedule possible. And the reason I want to start with students right now in this is because they are why we're here. They're the most important piece to this puzzle. We schedule for students. We don't schedule specifically for teachers. We don't schedule for courses. First and foremost, we schedule for students. So we're going to start there. So I'm going to click into students. And I have this menu that looks a whole lot like the start page on the live side. But the difference is here I have next year grade level and I have current grade level I can work from. And in my high school, notably, next year of 9 and current year of 8 are the same kids. But the reason I'm bringing you to this page is I want you to think about your students, where they're coming from, what building they're coming over from, and if they're pointed toward your PowerScheduler building yet. All right. So I want you all to pick the lowest grade level in your building. Now, some of you are middle school, so we're talking 6th or 7th grade for next year. I'm in a high school, so I'm picking 9th. Some of you, the answer might vary from what I just said. So select the next year grade level of the lowest number. I have 421 students pointed toward my building, currently in grade level 8. This is good news for me. I want to see this. You very well may be seeing something different. That's okay. Another step we've asked your district leaders to look at is setting the students to the right next school. Their next school is going to determine who sees them in PowerScheduler. If Chorus was pointed still to her middle school, the middle school would see her in PowerScheduler. But Chorus is pointed to the high school for next year because she's going to be a 9th grader going to the high school. Show you what I mean. I am going to use one example student, and I encourage you to do the same. Click into Chorus here. I have a lot of options up top via these tabs, but what I'm most concerned with in this moment is her preferences page. You probably have seen this before. This is the same page you see on the live side under the student page of student scheduling preferences, but you can edit it the same way over here. If this school, now please keep in mind, this gets a little confusing with the naming. This is a train environment. So it has picked some random school names in here. I know it doesn't match, but if I would, since I'm in Meta High School, if this were a real environment, they're pointed toward Meta High School, and that's why I'm seeing her in here. All right. If you have a student that you are not seeing, or an entire freshman class, which I know at least one of you is seeing, that is not available to you, that means they haven't been selected out of their current building and had their next school set to your building yet. And that's okay. We are not going to get caught up in that today. We're not going to pause or have you come back. We're going to still go through the steps, just knowing there may be some catch up you'll need to do later on that we can help you with in a workday. Okay. So again, if you're young students that haven't yet come over to your building, you're not seeing in PowerScheduler, we can help you with that at another time. All right, but that's something that needs done eventually. The other thing that's not nearly as important that I want to point out, and I can go back to search students and I'll get back to that page. That's the best way to get back here. Notice I'm keeping my selection. I can also look at my current year grade level of 12. So this menu is looking at the current grade level. All my seniors are still pointed toward Meta High School for next year. Again, not the biggest deal in the world, not a huge deal, but eventually someone in your district is going to need to grab this selection of students on the live side and point them toward the grad building and get them off of your list in PowerScheduler. Not nearly as important right now. So don't worry about them. Maybe just make a note that someone eventually has to do that, has to select all the seniors and point them toward the grad building for next year. And then you will no longer see them in PowerScheduler. But the most important piece to what I'm talking about right now is you do want to have your new incoming students very soon available to you. Because in a moment here, I'm going to walk you through how to set up all of your students for scheduling. And I will admit, I don't want anybody to panic, but if you're not seeing your youngest students, they won't be available to you, and therefore you can't set them up for scheduling right now, which is okay. We can do it later. All right, it gives you one small extra step. But we can set up for the majority today. I see a question in the chat. I noticed yesterday when I was setting this up that my high schoolers are all marked to schedule this student, and I just want to make sure that's okay at this point. Yes, that's okay. Go back to that screen. So again, I have my my young students here selected, and if they were set up this way last year, so these are static student values. All of these are what we call in PowerSchool on the meta side, static student values. In other words, they don't change until somebody changes them. So if I come in here and say, oops, that's wrong, this kid's actually a 2029, that would be important. I could submit that change. Also, your grade, your next year grades may be all wrong, and that's okay. That's something that we're going to fix this morning for the majority of your students, if not all. So these values can be changed individually on students from the live side or in PowerScheduler. But I'm going to show you how to grab all the students you have available to you in PowerScheduler and make mass changes in a moment here. Yeah, that's a good question. We're a career center, and we don't know what students are coming over next year yet. Should we use the youngest students we have this year? Yeah, this was just an example to make sure you have the right kids coming over. That's going to be a unique one. We probably have more than one on this call. That yeah, you won't have your quote youngest students yet, and that's okay. Yep, that's fine. Because we're gonna again set all of the students up in a moment here. Good questions. Thank you all for the questions. Keep them coming. All right. So with that said, again, I was just checking some students to see if I had the right kids in my selection. But I'm going to go back to PowerScheduler and the breadcrumbs to get to my main menu of PowerScheduler. I don't want to go back to the start page. Easy mistake to make. Start page will take you to the live side. We're not doing live side today. And I'm going to go back to that functions menu. Bottom left corner from the main PowerScheduler menu. Functions. In alphabetical order, we're doing autofill student information. All right. Middle school will have slightly different answers than our high school folks. In our documentation, if you do you have that pulled up on your PC or Mac, or you have it printed in front of you, that might help you with this next step. Maybe you need it, maybe you don't. But there is a reference screenshot of what each next grade level and priority and year of graduation equates to in the current year. So I'm going to do my best to guess. I think I know the answers. The column headers are current grade level. Something very important to note here. Current grade level are up here because, again, that's a static student field. So if Chorus is currently in the 8th grade, sitting in class today, she's part of this group right here. She's a grade 8, but she's going to be grade 9 next year. Grade 9s will be grade 10s, grade 10s will be 11s, grade 11s will be 12s. And believe it or not, if you're unfamiliar with this may be surprising, but grade 12s actually become 99s. Just a PowerSchool thing. All right, it's a way of categorizing our grads. Now you may be thinking, ooh, I've got 400 seniors and maybe 3 are at risk of not graduating, maybe more, I don't know. That's okay. This isn't changing state data. This isn't permanent. This isn't making it, official for the year. This is just for scheduling purposes. Just keep that in mind. All right. So we're just pointing all of these students to the next place. And that goes for our young kids too. If you do retain students, that's a different thing. Just keep in mind that we're scheduling for the majority at this moment, not for those one-off, two-offs, individualized situations. Another example would be a senior who's staying next year to complete more credits or a career program. So, but we're only scheduling for the majority right now. So down here, scheduled, I'm going to skip this for a moment. Schedule the student is set to yes. And I can change those current seniors to no if I have seniors. Do I have to do that? No. I mean, those kids won't be in the mix by the time I go to load students anyway, presumably. But I'm just cleaning up right now anyway. What this is doing here is I call it a catch-all. It's going to be a catch-all for, again, the majority. So yes, probably all my current 9th going into 10th graders were already set up to schedule. They're already set for the appropriate next grade level. But what about those new students that we missed? Maybe we didn't set up. Maybe someone forgot to check that box for schedule the student. We're just catching them all right now. Question in the chat, is there any scenario we wouldn't be doing this step? No. The answer is no. Everyone should be doing this step. We are setting every student up in PowerScheduler for scheduling. Again, the caveat with that is you may not have every single student pointed toward your building that you need, and we as a team can help you with that, but likely that's your district leader that needs to take care of that. For example, something we see is in the new student registration process. Let's say that you had a new student start on October 1st, not long ago, right? They're sitting in classes, they're getting grades, everything looks normal to everybody on the live side of PowerSchool. But whomever registered them forgot to plug in their next grade level, maybe their next school, and maybe didn't checkbox them to schedule. So those kids might need to be found later at a later date and updated individually or in a group. And that's what I'm saying. We're getting the majority here, but there could be kids in your district that are not in this mix right now. All PowerScheduler can see is kids that are pointed toward Meta High School next school year in my building. If they're not pointed toward Meta High School, it will not see them. But they can be found. There are some searches you can do from your start page. You can search for next school of blank on the start page in the live side, and you will find those students who have never been set with the next school. Again, they would be the new students in your district. But hopefully someone's taking care of that for you when they're registering those new students. That is the hope. Okay, priority. I'm going to plug in some numbers and I'm going to explain myself. I'm going to say 40, 30, 20, 10. Again, I am not worried about this group of kids. They are moving on, and I'm glad that they're moving on to the next big thing, right? So I'm not scheduling them next year is what I'm saying. These values pertain to the load. Priority is load priority. Think of this as a 1, 2, 3, 4 structure with some flexibility in the numbering. So my first priority is my rising seniors going into the next grade level. When I schedule those courses that have multiple grade levels that go into them, I want to make sure that my rising seniors get in those courses first. So the load priority structure is going to be 1, 2, 3, 4. I just added a 0 on the end to say 10, 20, 30, 40, so that I have some flexibility so that if I had a grouping of students or a select student, one kid, who needed a differing priority, I have some flexibility within those numbers. That's the only reason I did that. Okay, and that's what we recommend. So if we're in a middle school right now, you can also, if you're talking about current 5, 6, 7 grades or future 6, 7, 8, you could do a 10, 20, 30 on them. 1, 2, 3 is all we're doing. Please let me know if you have questions.
Stephen, I just wanted to mention that, what you just talked about, the 10, 20, 30, 40. One time I had a student that wanted very difficult classes to get into, and you mentioned about maybe changing the priority on a specific student so that that student would be enrolled or scheduled first. Was a grade 11 going into 12. I made him a 5 so that he would get priority over other upcoming seniors in scheduling.
Yep. Good example. The last thing we're going to take care of on this page, again, it's a catch-all. I'm going to bet most students are already set up correctly in your building, but in case they're not, I'm going to simply plug in the graduation years to them. And I think I have this right. Oh, 29, 28. My current seniors, if they're here in PowerScheduler still, I'll just make sure they have that 26 date on them. All right, again, a catch-all, not necessarily important to scheduling unless you search students this way by grad year, which you might. But just to make sure everybody matches. Next year's 9th graders are 2030s. Next year's 10th graders are 2029s, so on and so forth. So the catch-all to make sure all students are set up, you know, for all of their student values. We're changing student values right now. Question in the chat. At the middle school level, what priority would 8th graders going to the high school be? Oh, great question. Okay. I'm glad you brought that up because I forgot to mention this. This is great. So just like how a high school looks at their seniors, your current 8th graders at middle school, you don't have to schedule anymore. Therefore, it doesn't, I would leave them blank personally, because if they're not already, and they should be, but if your 8th graders aren't pointed to the high school, someone needs to do that. And then those kids are going to be here for your high schools. All right. So again, you don't have to schedule them. Therefore, you have nothing to fill in on your current grade 8s. You can let them be. Your high school can take care of them. Make sense? Just like a graduate. Think of them like a graduate. Moving on to the next big thing. Okay. All right. Once we have these values filled in, I do want to pause just for another moment. Is there any questions before I move on? I'm going to show you a great resource on the next page for looking at your student data. Okay. I'm going to proceed. I'm going to click submit. You should too. This will take a moment, depending on the size of your school. It's looking at every one of those students and either updating that information or, you know, making sure it matches. All right. So I got my green banner real quick and then it went away, said changes been made. We are ready to move on. So I haven't yet mentioned this today in this training, but if you've done PowerScheduler or even worked in PowerSchool for last year and the years before, you've heard us say the words PSCB custom reports. They are our friends. Here's a disclaimer. PSCB custom reports are a customization that were created by a different company, not by Meta. However, they're a great resource. I love them. So we're going to take you into PSCB custom reports. If for some reason you don't see this link, that means your district doesn't have the PSCB customization turned on. Secondarily, if they say something like dev in the middle, that means you have the paid version. So you might have a little bit more bells and whistles, some increased functionality with that your district pays for. I just wanted to point that out. So PSCB custom reports or PSCB dev reports is what you're looking for. I'm going to go there. And we utilize these all of the time. we refer to them all the time in the work days. So if you don't have them, I do recommend them. The first one I want to show you today is the student schedule preferences. And you will be able to see the results of what we just changed. So I'm going to go to student schedule preferences here. And if I had a student selection, which I do, I could just focus on that one from here. Another great thing about these reports, usually I have the option to select the current selection only if I wanted to look at a select group of kids. But in this case, I'm going to select all students. This will take a moment to load because I think I have like 1,500 students in this building. So let me give it a submit here. And I know that the page has not finished loading until I see this here. Total records. Okay, a lot more than I thought in my train environment. Over 2,000 kids. My guess is that it's because it's showing my current 8th graders all the way up through my current seniors. So I technically have 5 grade levels reflected here. Ideally, eventually, you will want only your next year's 9th through 12th graders on this list, right? You want those seniors moved on and moved out. So again, somebody needs to take these 99s and set them for the grad building from the live side. That may not be something you do and is not critical at this moment, so don't worry about it. All right, but I love these reports because I can sort and filter. So I can go by grade, next grade. Next school will all be matching because I'm only seeing these specific kids because I'm in PowerScheduler for Meta High School. So that won't be relevant right now, but I can see the differences in priority. All right, I do have some zeros because I have some grade 14s and 15s. Again, it's a train environment, some random data going on here. I'm not worried about that here in my building. But if you're seeing some different grade levels, some zero priorities, that may be something that needs corrected. That's up to you. Probably more importantly, is my students set to schedule or not? So my yeses are 1,586. So I now have next year, presumably, 1,586 kids coming back to me that I need to get scheduled. But I do want to check these no's, and I want to do this occasionally. Because again, going back to that point about you might get a new student in your building, maybe you know about them right away, maybe you don't. But if you're over here doing scheduling and they're not set to schedule, it doesn't matter what requests that you put on them for scheduling. It doesn't matter what you do with them. They're not going to load into courses if they're not set to schedule. So I'm going to click on no. I'm going to filter down. Love these filters. And okay, this is good news. I'm seeing grade level 12 and up that are not set to schedule. That's what I want to see. But again, another selling point for why to get these kids moved out and moved on, because it's much easier to look at when I can filter this down to no. And if I see like a current 8th grader or current 10th grader on this list, I'm going to be asking questions. Why are they not set to schedule? And do I need to set them to schedule? Question in the chat, we don't see current grade level 12. Is that a problem? Nope, that means your district leader has already set them as a next school to the grad building, and I love it. I love to see that. That's what you want. Eventually, everyone's going to want that. I'm not going to walk through how to do that in this training because that's something that typically a district leader would do. It's not always the scheduler. So that's why we don't go through how to change next school in this training. But yeah, some help you might need from someone else in your district. And again, if you need our help, if that's something that you do, maybe you're new, we can help you with that individually. Okay. So that's a bit about the student schedule preferences screen. Let's flip over to courses. I already talked about the editing course catalog screen where you had the checkboxes and you're deciding which courses to checkbox. I'm not going to go through that again. Just know that that is your homework, and that is something we can help with in a workday if you like. But I am going to pop back to PowerScheduler and the breadcrumbs. And I'm going to show you a couple of resources for your courses. One, under the word resources, courses, here's how I can look at any course. And I will say, Control F is your friend. Control F, algebra. I always use algebra as my example. This is the algebra class maybe I use. But you know what? This is a good time to point this out. I have so many Algebra 1 classes in here. Maybe you need them. Maybe you need 8 Algebra 1 classes. I hope not, but you might. What I want to point out is that these are all appearing because, one, someone excuse me, someone has made all of these algebra classes available to your building for next school year, and they continue to be made available by default every time you create a new year. And also, secondarily, your course catalog menu, those check boxes I showed you earlier, you keep checking those boxes to keep them in your catalog, and you're seeing them all here. If you don't want to see online algebra in PowerScheduler, uncheck it. If you never are going to schedule that in PowerScheduler, uncheck it. All right. But that's why I'm seeing so many. Again, maybe I need them all, maybe not. In the chat, somebody asked, is the track column important? This must have been pertaining to the student schedule preferences screen or report. Track has to do with attendance tracks. So at a high school level, for example, if your seniors go to school a different amount of days than the other students, or at the elementary level, a lot, kindergartners may start a couple days later, or preschoolers may start a couple days later, they would be on a different attendance track. So it's not something that's important to scheduling in PowerScheduler, but it does appear on that report, it looks like. So no, not important to what we're doing, but important for attendance. All right, I wanted to show you this page because, again, I'm going to use algebra as an example. And I can go to any course, and I've got some tabs at the top. So I'm just going to walk through these tabs fairly quickly. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time here. I'm going to start with preferences being the most important immediate thing that we need to talk about. This is how I know how my course is set up. Okay, we must have used this last year because it's set to schedule. It has a build type of standard. So when you're doing a system build, the courses should be set to a build type of standard unless they're a lab. And I'm just going to say, because that's so rare today, if you're scheduling labs that occur on differing days of the week, just talk to us. We'll help you with that. But typically standard. A maximum enrollment of how many kids you'd want in a section. The periods per meeting and frequency. We talked about this during the overview. Very important for the system build. This is all, by the way, all of these things are in your documentation. We've beefed up our documentation this year. And so what I shared to you by email yesterday lists every single one of these preferences and if it's needed for a system build and if it's needed for a load. So it goes through all of them. That's why I'm kind of glazing through them pretty quickly right now. So again, you have to know how many periods per meeting the course meets for if you're doing a system build, but not relevant for a copy. All right, same with frequency. I'm going to hop on down. I'm going to skip a couple of these. Valid start periods are important to a system build as well. So valid start periods pertains to when can that class be scheduled into? What are the options? Can it be all day long? Can it, or I should say, can it be any time of the day? Not all day long, any time of day. Is it real specific to it can only take place the first and maybe one of the last periods of the day? All right. So in a system build, every class has to have a valid start period, and every class has to have a valid term. This one's very clear. Which term does a course schedule within? Algebra, probably a year, maybe a semester if there's two different, versions of algebra, 1A and 2 and 1B or whatever. Whereas maybe your art class is only a semester. Pottery or something is a semester long. So it has to be reflected in the valid terms. And it can have more than one valid term. Like pottery may be have a valid term of S1 and S2 because it can be either. Okay. I am going to skip over the lab talk for now because it's not very frequent that people use that. I am also going to skip room requirements and facilities right now. It is a rarity, but could be very useful. Rooms are very important in PowerScheduler, and there are ways to set certain courses to certain rooms or types of rooms. So keep that in mind. Maybe something that's interesting to you. But I'm going to skip down to load options because this is the most important for everyone here. Whether you build or you copy, you will eventually run a load. That's why you're using PowerScheduler. And what the load does is it puts students into courses. Every student has a priority, as we talked about earlier. Every course has a load priority. So probably AP Spanish is going to have a different load priority than algebra. And the reason being is that there's only one AP Spanish section, but there's 8 different algebra sections. So you want, when the kid is loading into his requests or needs, we'll call them, you want him to go into his class that there's only one of before it loads him into a class that there's multiple places for him to go into. Okay. Load type is usually academic. We return to that topic in the online course requests training, but we're usually going to leave the course set to academic. All right, we're going to leave balance priority set to section. That doesn't typically change. We are going to talk a little bit about teaming this morning and section types a little bit this morning as well. But most importantly for now is closed section at max is what you want to checkbox if you truly want to honor in the load this max enrollment. This checkbox right here ensures that that no more than 30 students can get into each section of this algebra class. All right, so that has to be checked. So the advantage of reusing a course catalog, I'm going to come back to that now, is that these courses all have the settings they had last year. If you didn't reuse a course catalog, these would all be blank, and you would be setting up courses either in groups, in mass, or individually, each of them, which we don't want to see. So good news, though, there is a way, again, to set these up in mass. Those directions, we're not going to go through them in this session. Those directions are in your documentation in the staff student course setup doc, step by step, on how to grab a set of courses and set them all up similarly. And I'll give you an example. If it also explains a little bit more about load priority. And the only thing I want to say about load priority here today, if you haven't seen this before, is there are specific numbers that PowerScheduler's system prefers. So 31 may sound like an oddball number to use. And the other piece I want to add on there is that any number closer to 1 is a higher priority. Think of it in terms of priority number 1 or priority number 31. All right. There are preferred PowerScheduler priority numbers. That's in the documentation. I encourage you to use that. And I discourage you from using any other numbers except what's in the documentation. Again, this is a good workday activity. If you need help, either virtually or in person, we can help you get your courses set up. There's no reason you have to do all these individually, but there may be 1 off, 2 offs, 5 offs, 10 offs that you are going to have to come in and change. Like maybe, actually, this needs to be a 15. All right. Maybe we are using teaming on algebra classes this year. So there are times when you may return to this menu and make individual changes to courses. It's not all going to be one easy button for all, I will admit. There is some setup to be done, but reusing the course catalog does help immensely. Team, did I miss anything on course preferences here? Or I'm going to show them that PSAB report in a bit. I think it'll be more clear when we look at that report. All right, if not, oh, go ahead.
Could you look at valid terms on that page, please?
Yep.
Yeah, see, it's listed as 2526.
That's a great point, Mark. I'm glad you pointed that out. So I can change it individually, but I don't want to have to do that. So if you are, I will say, since you are reusing a course catalog that we advise you do, we will need to help you update all the year-long terms to the new year. So yeah, I'm so glad you pointed that out, Mark. I forgot about that from last year. Now that we reuse the catalog, the old catalog does still have those year-long terms of the prior year. Easy fix. You can put in a case if you need that done. So we're going to show you how to look at all of your courses at once. And if you're seeing courses scheduled in 25, 26, they will not build, they will not load unless they're set to the new year. We need to update them. We can mass update them for you pretty easily in the background. It's I would say the one caveat to reusing the course catalog. But thanks for pointing that out, Mark. Other pieces up here. If you are doing a system build, you will eventually have to tell the system how many assignments a teacher has of a specific course. So if Mrs. Nightingale teaches 5 sections of algebra, the system needs to know that here. It would be a new assignment. Select the teacher by associate, 5 sections. I don't need a schedule term code. So when you're making an assignment, don't even worry about that because the course preferences will tell the system when it takes place. The course preferences already know that the scheduled term is 26, 27. Therefore, I don't need it here. All right, that's very important because occasionally, at least a few times a year, that gets a little messed up and we have the wrong term code in here. I say leave it blank. It's a rare occasion where you need to use it on the screen. I'll just leave it that way. Okay. Now I'm going to go ahead and submit this. So Mrs. Acoustic is going to teach 5 sections. I don't know where. It could be anywhere in the schedule, but I know that she needs 5 sections. That's more the way a system build works. Again, it's using conflict resolution with student requests, but also teacher availability, course availability to figure out where to build these course sections. That's what it's doing for you. Okay. With that said, do not start building these assignments until you have your course preferences 100% set up. Something we've learned over the years. So just know that get your course catalog cleaned up, get the right courses in there, set all the preferences, then start putting in your assignments. And there's a good chance that, you know, you're thinking right now, looking way ahead. I don't know what my assignment. I don't know how many algebras Nightshade teaches right now. You might not know that. That's okay. We're not there yet, but off in the future, usually right before the build, you're going to be putting these assignments. Question in the chat, if we're doing a copy, do we need to add assignments? And the answer is no. And that's what I want to show you next. If I've copied my master and I look at sections, this is where some of our schedulers get a little confused, especially if you're new. The sections are the course sections that already exist in the schedule because I've copied them or hand built them. You know, I could technically build a section right here if I wanted to add an algebra class in 9th period, right? She doesn't currently teach 9th, but I need her to. I can add that here. It's part of that whole hand adjustment process. But if you are a build school, you're going to assignments. If you are a copy school, you're going to sections. We're going to talk about constraints. We're going to talk about relationships. And now I'm going to go, and that's going to be in just a little bit. And I'm going to talk about requests for just a moment. Once you start entering student requests for algebra, they will appear here. In my humble opinion, there's better places in PowerScheduler to look at student requests than this page here, but it is one way. If I was working on this algebra course, I might want to pop over here for a quick reference. But if I was truly looking at student requests, I would go to PSCB reports. There's some good ones. Okay. Questions there about courses? let's go to PSCB reports now. So again, PSCB custom reports or dev reports are always going to be in the top left corner of your PowerScheduler menu. And the very first, for most of you, is course schedule preferences. On the paid reports, I believe it appears secondly, just to point that out. But course schedule preferences is what you want. Love this report here. I can see how every one of my courses is set up. I can filter by load priority, by anything on here. Terms, all right, valid days, valid start periods, which again, these here are only needed for the build. So this school may have copied last year. This information, once again, selling point for use in the course catalog, this information all came over from last year. So it may need to change, but you're a good amount of the way there by reusing. Also, again, in our instructions, in our step-by-step course setup instructions, document that's available to you, you can find out how to set every single course to a standard build, or grab a group of courses for a load priority of 15. And then, again, it's something easy on our end to do. We can go ahead and, if you just put in a case, we can go ahead and change these 25, 26 terms to 26, 27 if you need us to. Pretty easy for us to do. But this is a great resource. And I also want to point out another great thing about this report. This functionality came out a couple of years ago. Love it. I can go to the course preferences by simply clicking on that. And I'm going to get the same menu I showed you earlier. Exact same information. I can change a course here, or I can change it from the courses menu, whichever you prefer. Okay? If I'm changing an individual course. Questions on course setup? Teachers. Let's talk about teachers. Also a very important piece to this puzzle, right? Can't happen without our teachers. So the final resource I'll be talking about today, I'm not going to cover rooms this morning. That's something that may or may not come up. Rooms do come over year to year. So unless you have a new building or you're changing all the naming convention entirely of rooms, we wouldn't talk too much about rooms, but rooms are very, very important. I just want to make that clear. You do want to make sure that every room is set to schedule that you need. It's pretty clear in this menu how to set a room to schedule, but again, that information comes over year to year. So not much usually changes, but if you need our help with that, that's a workday talk. So let's go to teachers. Okay. I'm going to start with my example teacher here, Nightshade. And it's a similar layout to the student menu, to the course menu, whereas we have tabs. It's a little jarring, I think, for our new PowerSchool users where we have that new menu on the live side, but PowerScheduler does look different. It looks like the old menu. So we have these tabs. We have on the main page, we have the hyperlinks over here instead of pop-out menus. So it's just something to get used to if you're, again, newer to PowerSchool. But just like with students and with courses, the most important tab here is preferences. So you can put a department on a teacher, but you don't have to. All right. In fact, a lot of times we recommend against it. I'm not going to get into the nitty gritty about that today. If you have them there, it's probably doing you no harm. If you have a department on a teacher, you can leave it alone. We're good. But usually there's not a reason to go through every teacher and set them into a department. Usually. Preferred room. For a system build especially, you would want your system to know which room the teacher teaches in. So for example, Nightshade teaches her courses in 1002. In the build process, I want her sections built in 1002. Now, if Nightshade doesn't have an assigned room, I might not want her assigned to a room. and I want the system to find the best place for her in the big puzzle of scheduling. So I would leave her room blank. So again, there's reasons to use a preferred room. There's reasons not to. If you're a copy building, I would think about putting their assigned room in there anyway, just so you have it. It's a nice reference point. But for a copy, you don't need it because, again, the sections already come over from the live side, and you're hand adjusting the sections. The system's never going to decide in a copy where to put your classes, so not necessary. So if you're seeing all blanks for preferred rooms, you may have been copying your schedule for years, or whomever came before you is doing that. So just keep that in mind.
Just a comment. I'm
Yeah, go
sorry,
ahead.
Stephen. Comment on preferred rooms. You might want to make sure you have preferred rooms if you have, for example, a math wing, a science wing, etc. Also, if you have a chemistry teacher, you want to make sure that the preferred room is a chem lab because you'll need equipment in there.
Good point. Max consecutive periods. This has to do with system building again, not with a copy. This is telling the system how many periods in a row I can schedule a teacher for. This number is super important in the realm of system building and could cause you errors if not set right. By default, when you get a new staff member, they're going to be set to 1. Now, if they can only teach 1 class in a row, what you're telling the system is they can teach a class, then they need a break. Then they can teach another class and they need a break, so on and so forth. Also, if you schedule several periods per meeting in the way you do your scheduling around your lunches, which again, referencing back to our overview a couple weeks ago, then this would never work. So usually we recommend in a system build 1 more than half the amount of periods in your system build. So if you're using a 15 period day, I would say go 8 or 9. That way your teacher gets scheduled for about half her day before she, quote, needs a break. And then ideally she'd have a free period around lunch is the thinking there. But we tweak that as we go. So when you run a system build, if you're having trouble adjusting, getting a teacher to her schedule to work out, you may have to adjust that number. And that's something that we help you with in the work days, I want to assure you. So that's I don't know. I'm just speaking for myself here. That's the fun part of our job. We get to kind of problem solve and troubleshoot with you either in the room or virtually. And I think that's kind of neat figuring out the puzzle. So is always free, a rarely used option, but if you have like a fake teacher name or just a name that you're going to put on a bunch of courses, maybe temporarily, or truly, you have a study hall teacher that's just, she's the monitor for every period of the day, you could set her to always free. But we don't recommend it until that's something that's an option we might exercise in the build process to work on getting your teachers scheduled to build. But it doesn't happen a whole lot. Usually it's for like a fake teacher schedule just to get them to build. Or like a principal's name we're putting on lunches and CCP classes temporarily or something like that. So if you see is always free, it's probably on a teacher like that is not utilized in a traditional fashion throughout the day. Don't use this schedule for lunch. That's not something we use here in Ohio. Optional settings. I'm not going to spend much time on this. We haven't talked about teams yet. There are houses, there are buildings. We're not going to talk about that today. Again, very rarely used. So we're going to skip that. Again, I told you I'd talk about constraints. That's where we're heading pretty quickly here. The schedule is literally the teacher's schedule. So I'm assuming that Nightshade already has a schedule. Yep, she has a schedule. Just like when I looked at the courses for algebra, I can also look at her schedule here. I talked about assignments, and that's most of what I want to talk about for teachers with one exception. I want you all to think about the teacher who is newest in your building. So who's the teacher who started in the spring, the summer, maybe just last month, maybe today? And if so, is that teacher on your list? Because they might not be, and I'm going to tell you why. go ahead and drop it in the chat if there's a teacher you can think of, but you don't see on this list. And maybe you're not sure why. And you might know the answer, but that's okay. Nobody? Surprising. We have a few teachers, I see. A few new teachers. Yep. Okay, good. Okay, another school missing some teachers. Yep. It's expected. I completely expect it. That's good. So it also, this is for everybody. So if you eventually notice that you're missing a teacher over here, or you do get a new teacher from now until the end of the scheduling season, you'll know how to correct that. So I'm going to show you right now. This is the one time in today's training I am going to go to the live side of PowerSchool. I'm going to go to the start page. And I'm going to change over to staff search instead of students. And I'm going to either find that teacher name, or I'm going to go to the teachers. Just pull up all the teachers. It's up to you on how you want to handle this. I will do it this way because I don't know who I'm looking for. I'm just going to find an example. But if you know who you're looking for, just start typing their name and find them that way. So I'm going to pick on this teacher here. Cool name. And go to their schedule settings. This is another one of those places on the live side you may not have access to. I've seen that in some of our districts. That's okay. But somebody will need to go to their schedule setup page on the live side. This is going to look very familiar to what I just showed you. If this box is not checked on Jax, our new teacher, he's not going to show up in PowerScheduler. That's all this does. That's all this field does. I could, from over here, set up his department, his preferred room, his max consecutive periods. But once I check this box and submit, I now have him available to me in PowerScheduler, and that's the most important thing. So before you start going through your teachers, setting up preferences, which I'll show you a little bit more about here, you'll want to make sure they're all available to you that you need on the PowerScheduler side, and this is how you do it. You're going to come to the live side. You're going to check that box. It's really simple, but in some districts, this is taken care of for you of someone else. Like in some districts, when they set up a new teacher, they'll go ahead and do that for you. But a lot of people honestly don't know what that does and maybe don't see the need for it. So it may fall on you to make sure that gets done. Any questions about selecting those teachers over on the live side to get them to PowerScheduler? Okay. Okay, and lastly, about teachers in PowerScheduler, as with all of our resources that I've mentioned, there's a great report for this, teacher schedule preferences. But this one comes with a caveat. Teacher schedule preferences, great report. However, what we've noticed over the years is that even when a teacher is made inactive, they will still show on this report if they're still set to schedule per that checkbox I just mentioned. So someone did their due diligence. They did inactivate the teacher. They haven't worked here in a year or 5 years or whatever. But if that box is still checkboxed on that teacher record, they are going to show on this report. So in other words, this report pulls every teacher that was ever in this building that says schedule this teacher on it. But it is nice to look at. I can see all the teachers that are available to me. And if I ever want to clean that up, now I know how to do it. Just go to the live side, search that inactive teacher record. You have to use a backslash and, you know, uncheck that box if you don't need to see them anymore. So just the opposite of what we just did. I don't need to see syntax anymore. I can go set her not to schedule, and I won't see her on this list anymore. But in my opinion, good resource. As you've probably already noticed, and if you weren't familiar before today, all of these reports can be exported. So if you are an Excel person or a Google Sheets person that likes to work with your data that way, you can export these, work with the data in the program you're most comfortable with, or you can simply use the filters and sorts from this page. So that is the wrap up on resources in PowerSchool. Any questions? So what we did in the last few years is we had a separate session for what we just showed you, students, staff, and course setup. But we thought this would fit well this year right in the auto scheduler setup process. And we're open to feedback about that. What we used to do is meet with each individual. But I think there's so many statements and things we can walk you through as a group that it just made more sense to just show you all this. With all that said, I do want to make sure you know we're here for every step of the way. So if there's any part of this that you're like, well, I really need to sit down with a meta team member and go through my students or go through my courses, or I need help updating a mass amount of courses, that's what our work days are for ultimately. So regardless of how these sessions go, anything you need follow up with, that's why we're here. We've got the scenario planning sessions, we're calling them right, you know, for this month, but then we move into what we call workday mode in January. In any of these things that are being discussed today can be talked about at those kind of work days. Also, if you're looking at the calendar and you don't see a work day, you're saying, okay, the work days don't start officially till mid-January, but I need to get started on this in mid-December. You can schedule time with us, so please put in a case, and we will get it on our calendar. So I just want to reassure you that I know it's a lot of information we're giving you this morning, and then but you're not on your own. We're with you. Okay. So just like the overview, and I'm not done yet. I want to make that clear. But just like the overview, as we deliver all this information to you, the ideal scenario is that you go back and meet with your team and you discuss these topics, figure out what kind of help you need and you want and how you want to schedule. And then you come meet with us and share that, and we help you out with what you need. With all that said, lastly on our agenda for today is what I'm calling other considerations and setup. I've referred to some of these things a little bit. I am just this is going to be a short part of the training. We are getting to, it's 11:12. I know it's a long time to sit and listen. I appreciate you sticking with me. We did promise wrap up by 11:30. I'm still on track with that. But I'm just going to talk about some different ways to group students with this. And so I just wanted a little visual so you could see where we're going here. There are several ways to group students. So build constraints, I'm going to start there right at the top. Build constraints, the most common are going to be, let me go back here, give you a better visual here. There is a constraints menu in PowerScheduler. We have a set of build constraints and load constraints. Build constraints are for before you system build. And again, if you copy, these are completely irrelevant to you. But I just want to spend a little bit of time on this. Pre-schedule is exactly what it sounds like. I have 8 algebra sections, but one has to be first period. I can pre-schedule that one. Or I have 8 algebra sections and 3 of them need to be pre-scheduled throughout the day. I can pre-schedule those. All right. Teacher free is what it sounds like. I need to have that teacher free in 4th period every day. I make them teacher free. All right. Those are the most commonly used ones. Course room, probably pretty clear as well. I need this course only scheduled into this room. Not as commonly used, I will say. Teacher part-time, I don't see that one used a lot. I would use the teacher free over the part-time, just, thinking out loud here. Okay. Load constraints, the most common use of load constraints. This is for the post build or for a copy. The most common type is a section link. What a section link does is it keeps students together from course section to course section. So I've seen schools have an Algebra 1 class, but also an Algebra 1 lab. And so maybe a very specific of Algebra 1 class, maybe a specific section of Algebra 1 class has a group of kids who also need a second period in their day that they need to go to lab, get some extra support. You can section link them so they go into the same section together. So those kids flow together. The more clear example and the more likely way someone would use that is an Algebra 1A, Algebra 1B situation. I schedule all my Algebra 1As in the fall and my Algebra 1Bs in the spring, but I want my kids to stay together. If they land in first period for A, first semester, I want them to be in first period for B, second semester. I don't want them shuffled. If you use Algebra 1As and 1Bs and you don't section link the two, then they will flow into any Algebra 1B in second semester that the system finds is the best spot, which may match where they were in 1A, but not necessarily. So section linking is the most commonly one used here, and we can help you with that. You would simply plug in the course name, the course number and the section number of the first, and the course number and the section number of the second of what they need linked to. And again, keeps the students together. Student free is what it sounds like. I need the student to be free. They have physical therapy first thing in the morning, at our building, and they can't have a first period. Then student avoid, very rarely, not very, but a little more rarely used. But in middle schools, we see this sometimes. I can't have Johnny and Sally in the same class ever. So student avoids, I would use those sparingly, because keep in mind that Johnny and Sally might both want band and choir. And they might both be in all the honors classes. So how do they avoid each other? They also are in the same grade, and all the seventh graders to eat lunch together. It won't schedule the kids together anywhere if you do a student avoid. So you will get a report that says why Sally couldn't be scheduled anywhere, because the system found the only place to schedule him was with Johnny. So I'm not saying don't use it. We have plenty of buildings that do, several buildings that do, but just know the consequence that you're going to run into in the load process if you use student avoids. Some of our buildings use it successfully and then just hand schedule from there. And speaking of which, student preferences, I would also say use sparingly. Great tool. You can tell the system the student number, the course number, and then either what term they need to be in that course, or which section number they need to be in that course, or which teacher they need to be with. Let's say there's 3 algebra teachers in your building. They have to have Smith. You could plug her name in here. Okay. Course relationships are different from constraints. Course relationships are way courses relate to each other. So again, I'm going to go through this fairly quickly, and this is something that we can discuss more in a workday if you feel like this might be helpful. But a quick overview is when I go to the courses menu, I'm picking a course at random, by the way. You can build a course relationship to associate to a different course and how it's related to that course. There are definitions in our documentation of each of these, what they do, what they won't do for you, pretty much. And some of them are very easy to use. Some of them honestly cost more trouble than they're worth. But there are some ones that do well. So keep that in mind. If you need, for example, a course, to stay 2 course sections in 2 different terms to stay together in the same period, Not talking about student load right now, talking about the build. The relationships are for the build. So again, if you're a copy load only, don't worry too much about the relationships. I would go with constraints instead. Okay, so that's a really quick overview. I guess the other most commonly used way that we use relationships is if you need two courses built at the exact same time. Maybe it's the same teacher, maybe it's not, but maybe your special group algebra and geometry needs to be built at the exact same time for the purpose of students, going back and forth, or just being all in math at the same time. So that's another reason you might use relationships. And then finally, grouping students more specifically. Teaming, usually more often used at an a middle school level, right? We team students, like I have my red, blue, and green team. And if they go to a red team teacher for math, that means they go to a red team teacher for English, social studies, and science. But then in their electives, they go to whichever electives in their schedule they need to fulfill all their needs. But maybe they stay together for teaming for core courses or for advisory or something like that. It's a way to keep students together in groups as they flow from class to class, but not like elementary where they stay together all day long. Could be. I mean, we have middle schools that do a little bit of that, a little bit more of that, where they all stay together. But teaming could do that for you. I'm gonna make a case for why to avoid section types, but I am gonna tell you about it so you know what it is. So section types are strict. It's a way to tell the system which type of a section of a course students have to go into. So I'll give you an example. Maybe you have the same, your English 6 class for your incoming sixth graders. It's called English 6 across the board, but you want a certain group of kids to go into one section versus another. You could section type that section, but it's strict. It will only allow them into the section typed matching section that they have on the request. So the request has to be the section type has to be on the request, and it has to be on the section. And if they can't get into that section or one of those sections, they will not be scheduled. So it's strict. It's rarely used anymore, and let me tell you why. Because you might be thinking that sounds like a great opportunity for grouping students appropriately. I'm gonna try to sell you on program balancing in the moment. So program balancing does a lot of that, but it does more. So program balancing is a way to group students into sections, but allows the flexibility of students that are not designated to load into those sections as well. So here's an example. I need a group of students into a specific Algebra 1 class because there's a teacher that's going to be available in first period in that Algebra 1 class, a co-teacher, I'll call her. So my 10 students have to be in that group. But not only those special ed students need to be in that group, I also want the general ed population to flow into there as needed. So if there's an open spot in a student's schedule who needs Algebra 1 in first period, in first periods available in his schedule, I want him to go to Algebra 1 as well. So it's a way of doing what we call inclusion type courses with the flexibility of getting the right kids in the section, but also any other kids who need to get into that section in that section. Whereas section typing is going to be strict and only the kids identified will go into that section. With that said, program balancing can also do that. Maybe you do have a course when there's a section that only a certain population of students need to get into that specific section of a course. You can designate only that course, just like section typing. It's not the most common use of program balancing, but you can designate a section and only those kids will get into that section. It's all in the identifying, it's all in the identification of the students ahead of time. And that identification isn't seen by parents or students. So These identifications for program balancing is only used for the purpose of scheduling. It may be because of gifted ed or ELL or special ed or something else. But again, it's not, something that shows up in the public portal and, things like that. So you might call them like scheduling groups, if you will. A lot of your districts already have this set up. It is set up at the district office level. So those groupings, those groups of students, those programs, they're called, need to be set up at the district. And then it's your job to place those kids into the programs. And then when you run the load, the kids will go into, again, the right sections. Any questions about ways to group students? I know I just put a lot on you. This is probably worth discussing more in a workday, but this is kind of the introduction to all of that. I'm not seeing anything in the chat, not hearing anything. Next steps. We have some scenario planning availability this afternoon, and I think tomorrow, we might be full tomorrow. And maybe next week, I can't remember if we have any on the schedule. It's on our calendar, so please go to our calendar, check out what's coming up. I referenced this a little bit earlier. We do have a training called Online Request Screens and Teacher Recommendations, and it's how to use the online request screen so that your students can go into the public portal and enter their own requests. What's great about those is that you get to designate what they can choose and what they can't in a variety of ways. So there's a little bit of setup, but the best news for that setup is just like your course catalog, that information comes over from prior years. So there may be very minimal setup to get going again this year, unless you've never used request screens, in which case definitely come to that training. Workdays, I've mentioned a lot here. Workdays are those flexible, they're not trainings. They're not, where we're going to be talking at you the whole time, like this may have felt like this morning. It is truly, you come in either virtually for a timed appointment or in person at either our Marion or Columbus offices. We also have a couple days scheduled up in Strongsville. So our Northeast Ohio schedulers can meet with us in person on one day in February and one day in April if needed. And but for Marion and Columbus, it's basically every other week once we get started in January. You can come to our office and sit in a computer lab, and you can work on your scheduling, ask questions, several schedulers in the room for you. Again, going back to the virtual, if it's virtual, it's more like our scenario planning sessions this afternoon. It's going to be timed appointment. You come in, you get a couple of us in a room, and you can ask some questions or talk through what you're working on.